I think it's unacceptable the unions have opted to make this decision that keeps kids out of class tomorrow. It is an attempt to pressurize the government, but to be quite frank, it only frustrates parents and hurts kids from an academic perspective.
We are just 6 hours from a strike deadline and still no deal between the province and high school teachers. If no deal is reached before midnight, public high schools across the province will be closed tomorrow for a one-day strike. Our Natalie Danowski joins us live from the Sheraton Hotel where contract talks are happening. And Natalie, some parents have showed up there to show their support for teachers.
Right, Dwight. Dozens of parents have showed up. They have signs, they have pizza. They're here with one real message to the government. They don't believe that the government is negotiating fairly with teachers, and they want the government to show teachers some more support. And I'm here actually with one of the parent organizers, Jessica Lyons. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. Quick question for you. What do you want the government to know? What's your message?
Teachers and parents are fighting for the same thing. We're behind teachers all the way. We cannot be divided from teachers. We know they're fighting for kids. We're behind them.
All right, perfect. I'll let you get back to the protest. They're going to be here for about another hour or so. And Dwight, as you mentioned, this is right outside where negotiations are taking place. And as you mentioned, there's just 6 hours or so left.
From what we heard today, it doesn't sound like the two sides are close to a deal. Natalie, what's the latest now on the actual negotiations?
You know, it really sounds like they're not listening to each other because they're saying two very different things. Now, earlier today, the education minister spoke to the media at Queen's Park. He says that the government is doing everything that it absolutely can to keep the union at the table. In fact, he even said that the government presented the union a new offer today and made a few changes. So have a listen to what he said.
We have today, through our mediators, offered a new framework that we think, or we believe in our estimation, should keep them at the table. We hope they will. And currently, we're able to achieve some of the mutual objectives, including innovative ways and even the classroom sizes.
So just shortly after that, Dwight, CBC News reached out to the union to ask what exactly was in that offer that was presented to them. And the union came back saying that they don't know anything about an offer. They haven't heard anything about an offer. Have a listen.
After I was told through the media that some new proposal had been made, I sent my bargaining team back to speak with the mediator and say, did we miss something? Did the other side make a proposal to us? And the mediator's answer was no. So the minister, I don't know what the minister is talking about. I'm not convinced that he does.
So we're going to be speaking with the president in a little bit, trying to figure out exactly what happened. Maybe the deal was just presented right now. Maybe they got it at this point. Now, they are inside negotiating some of the things that they're looking for. What the teachers actually want is a 2% pay increase and a cap on class sizes. The government, on the other hand, says that it's only willing to give a 1% pay increase over the course of 3 years because there is going to be a pay freeze. They also say that students are going to have to take a mandatory of 2 e-learning courses. That's something that teachers, of course, don't want. So there's about 6 hours left in these negotiations. We're supposed to have an announcement by midnight. So by midnight, we'll know whether or not Ontario's public school, high school teachers will be walking off the job tomorrow. Dwight?
Thank you, Natalie. People displaced by a deadly apartment fire say they are now worried about ending up homeless. Hundreds of residents had to move out of the high-rise on Gosford Boulevard more than 2 weeks ago, and they say the property manager isn't doing enough to help them. Nick Bovair has more.
When we looked up off the balcony 2 floors above us, it was engulfed. Flames coming right off the balcony.
It's been more than 2 weeks since Jim Laferriere woke up to that shocking sight. He says the time since has been brutal and unrelenting.
It's heartbreaking. I never thought at my age that I'd be sitting on a cot in a homeless shelter.
In mid-November, his building at 235 Gosford Boulevard suffered a devastating fire. The incident sent about 700 residents scrambling for temporary homes. Laferriere and Buck, his 11-year-old lab, landed at this hotel in Vaughan, but his room is only covered for a few more days.
What's next for you once this time runs out here?
I have no idea. That's why my lawyers are taking care of this now. It's in their hands.
Good morning. I'm Daryl Singer, head of civil and commercial litigation here at Diamond & Diamond.
Today, those lawyers revealed what could become a class action lawsuit. They say building operator Ron K Management isn't doing enough to help its tenants. In some cases, the building is only providing alternate accommodation until January.
Many of these tenants have nowhere to go and limited financial resources. Essentially, hundreds of them could be homeless on New Year's Eve.
There are also allegations the building was in a state of disrepair.
There were serious issues with the heating and electricity in this unit. We've had reports for months of sparks flying out of people's radiators or light sockets.
Ron K has not responded to those allegations or to an interview request from CBC. Mayor John Tory is calling on the company to do more.
I'm interested in people taking responsibility, and principally the landlord taking responsibility. We've made that very clear to them.
Tenants say those responsibilities include providing alternate housing while the building is repaired, paying transition checks to tenants, and arranging transportation to schools and daycares. If that doesn't happen, lawyers say they could be in court as soon as next week. Nick Boisvert, CBC News, Toronto.
After a little girl was killed outside this building by a falling air conditioner unit, questions are now being raised about why the city didn't do something sooner, when more than a decade ago, a report outlined the possible dangers. I'm City Hall reporter Lauren Pelly, and I'll have more on that coming up.
The Toronto man accused of throwing feces at numerous people on and around Toronto University campuses was in court today. Afterwards, his lawyers said his client is fit to face the charges against him.
Jail is not an appropriate place for my client, and I'm not going to speak specifically about my client's situation in terms of his mental health status. There's been a lot of speculation that the allegations may suggest some mental illness, understandably.
23-year-old Samuel Opoku has been charged with 5 counts of assault in 3 separate incidents that took place just over a week ago. Opoku will return to court for a bail hearing on December 18th.
This is what the underneath of the subway looks like.
Forced to walk through dark and smoky subway tunnels after a fire shut down a portion of Line 2 for hours yesterday morning. It was a terrible commute into work for subway riders with major delays and overcrowding. It's the second time in a matter of months that service along the line has been disrupted due to infrastructure issues. Ali Shahsan joins us live now from Dundas West Station. And Ali, you dug into the state of the TTC today.
That's right, Dwight, and that's because yesterday's fire in the tunnels underneath Dundas West Station here really raised a lot of questions over the state of Line 2 and the TTC's aging infrastructure as a whole, and also questions about what we're doing about it. Have a listen.
Is there room for improvement? I'm sure there is, but overall, it takes us where it should, and it is reliable.
Do you find the TTC very reliable?
I think people complain a lot more than they should. Yesterday was a pretty bad day.
Yeah. This is what the underneath of the subway looks like.
A fire in the subway tunnel? That's a bad day for everyone, from those forced to evacuate to those above ground waiting for a shuttle bus during morning rush hour. Is the TTC reliable?
Yes, it is, but it's not like it used to be.
These days, there are urgent issues on both subway lines. Line 1 needs work to increase capacity to prevent overcrowding on platforms. And the tunnel and rail infrastructure along Line 2 needs some serious attention. Yesterday, a section of it was on fire. And while we see improvements being made through signal upgrades and Wi-Fi at stations, I asked the mayor. We have these 50-year-old wooden slats that line 75% of Line 2, and that's what caught fire yesterday. And the TTC made a specific point that, the aging infrastructure is a real problem here. So what investment is really going to make the biggest difference?
The deal we've arrived at with the province, one of the great benefits of it is that they take the responsibility for the cost of the transit expansion projects.
Network.
He's referring to a deal the city struck with the Doug Ford government last month that would see the province, with some help from the federal government, build new transit, like the Ontario line, new stations, etc.
Which frees up literally billions of dollars that we can apply more quickly than we would have been able to do.
Right now, the TTC needs $33.5 billion to keep running, and roughly 2/3 of that is unfunded. The mayor wants the other levels of government to share the cost.
I'm on this, and I recognize the backlog that exists, and we're actually doing something about it.
So I spoke today with City Councillor Shelley Carroll, who is on the TTC board, and she told me that she would like to see Line 2 become more of a priority in terms of getting some of this funding that they are trying to secure before another fire happens. Now, I had a lot more specific questions about Line 2's infrastructure that I would have liked to have posed to the TTC CEO, but I was told he was unavailable for comment. Dwight.
We haven't seen as much of him as we did of the last CEO, so we're going to keep trying. Thank you, Ali.
You got.
The city closed down a part of Bay Street this morning due to falling ice. Pieces of ice were falling from surrounding buildings around 10 a.m. All lanes were blocked off for about 3 hours between Wellington and Harbour, including sections of Union Station and the CN Tower. That freeze-thaw cycle. Leading to icicles falling down.
Yeah, you got that right, Dwight. And that's why I wanted to start with the temperature story, because when you have these temperatures that kind of hover right around the freezing mark, just go a little bit above, it's a very slow melt, but we do get a little bit of a melt, especially closer to the lakeshore, and we get into those kind of situations where you get some of that ice sliding off, especially rooftops and such. So the temperatures right now, sitting at -1 for Toronto, we popped up to just above freezing at 1 degree. You still have to factor the winds in. Even though coming from the southwest as we go into tomorrow, it's a slightly warmer direction, but it gives us a wind chill. So for now, it feels like about -5. By tomorrow morning, it's going to feel like a -7 or so. So what you might take note of there is that there's not a big change in our temperature and not a big change in our wind chill into tomorrow. We stay nearly steady as this weak trough is pushing towards us, bringing some light flurry activity. These are wet flurries, at times being a little bit of a mix. They'll back off. We're going to see them into the evening hours, and then they'll back off, and there'll be a break, and then kind of returning off and on tomorrow through the day. We may get a dusting to 1 centimeter or 2, but that's going to be very difficult because they will be wet flurries or near the lakeshore mixing with some light sprinkles, and so it's going to be hard for anything really to accumulate. The difference is going to be in the lee of Lake Huron, where we'll see some squalls setting up tomorrow afternoon. We'll take a look at some of the accumulation numbers there coming up, but overnight tonight, -2 for your low. Tomorrow afternoon, 2 degrees. There's a warm up. It's down the line, Dwight, but I'm going to tell you about it coming up.
Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
After a toddler was killed by a falling air conditioner unit on Remembrance Day, Toronto Community Housing has announced sweeping changes to prevent another tragedy. But now questions are mounting over why TCH didn't take action sooner when the dangers have been clear for more than a decade. Lauren Pelly has more.
In an instant, the Scarborough Community Housing building changed from one family's home to the scene of incomprehensible tragedy. A falling window air conditioner hit and killed 2-year-old Crystal Morogo right in front of her mother and siblings. Just last night, the city's low-income housing provider announced it would be removing all 6,000 window AC units by Christmas if they're not over a balcony. And at a cost of around $5 million, they're giving all those tenants free floor units instead.
Questions are now being raised about why it's taken this long to make a switch, when back in 2007, more than a decade ago, this third-party report warned city officials about the potential dangers of window air conditioners.
The report found most units were not properly installed, adding this posed a safety issue since the units could potentially fall out of the windows.
That's a real, troubling fact for us.
The Morogo family's lawyer says it's clear no action was taken until after Crystal's death.
We think this was an entirely preventable incident, and we sort of wish that the TCHC did something in the 12 years that they were warned about it.
City officials blame old policies and high management turnover at the housing agency.
I am heartbroken at the fact that what, prompted people to move faster and to do something that now has been proven to be able to be done in a matter of months, that had to happen.
I think this clearly shows what the kind of change, and you could even say some turmoil that has happened over the years at TCHC.
Moving swiftly now, the housing provider is aiming to replace all window units by the spring. Meanwhile, Crystal's family is considering legal action.
We understand that municipal licensing and standards issued orders in 2017, and it looks like multiple orders for the TCHC to address this issue of unsafe AC units and windows. We want to see what, if anything, was done about those orders.
No matter what comes of that investigation, it won't change the fact that one little girl's life was already cut short. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
The City of Toronto unveiled details of its 10-year housing plan today. It includes 13 steps to improve access to housing, including creating 40,000 new affordable rental homes and 18,000 new housing units for people who are homeless or at risk of being homeless. The cost of this plan will be just over $23 billion over the next decade. The city plans to contribute $8.5 billion and will need other levels of government to foot the rest of the bill. His tweet set off a tidal wave within the NHL. Today, former hockey player Hakeem Alou met with the commissioner and deputy commissioner of the league here in Toronto.
It's been a tough week, but we had some great discussion with Gary and Bill. They couldn't have been kinder and receptive to the message that we're trying to bring. And I think there's just some big change coming, and it's long overdue, and I'm excited to see it come to fruition.
The meeting follows Alou's allegation that former Calgary Flames head coach Bill Peters used a racial slur several times during the 2009-2010 season while the two were with the Chicago Blackhawks organization. Peters resigned last Friday. The NHL put out this statement after the meeting saying, quote, "We are pleased to have met with Hakeem Alou today and had a productive and candid conversation. Today's discussion is part of a broader, thorough review and process that the league is undertaking. We share a mutual objective, ensuring that hockey is an open and inclusive sport at all levels." It seems like every day a new story comes out about an NHL coach. Now Chicago Blackhawks assistant coach Marc Crawford has been put on leave while the team investigates his behavior. Greg Ross takes a closer look at these new allegations of abuse and the conversation that's now being had at all levels of hockey.
If you don't know the drill, don't go first. While the spotlight may be on NHL coaches after multiple revelations about inappropriate behavior, the pressure is being felt by coaches at all levels.
We hear it, we see it. Culture change is happening. Stick up ice right there.
Derek Allen coaches the Fern Avenue Public School boys team. He says the problems we're hearing about in the NHL happen at all levels.
They may be at a different degree or level, but you know, very much so. I don't think that they're exclusive to the NHL. You see treatment of sometimes young kids as if they're in the NHL, yelling and screaming, swearing, that type of thing. That old school motivational tricks that really don't have a place in today's game.
All right, I got to set the record straight here.
Former NHLer Sean Avery recently revealed that coach Marc Crawford kicked him while he played for him on the Los Angeles Kings, but then later defended the coach.
Marc Crawford had every right in the world to kick me in the ass. He should have spanked my ass a little bit more. I deserved it.
Crawford was later put on leave by the Chicago Blackhawks, where he is an assistant coach. The behavior described by Avery is something Hockey Canada has been trying to eliminate for years.
All coaches have to go, or all team officials have to go through a respect and sport program, which teaches them about some of the issues that are being highlighted in the media today.
GTHL Executive Director Scott Oakman says it's important for hockey to change in order to keep up with the times.
I think we're growing as a society, and I think globally we're just learning the way that we should be treating people.
Anybody can make that pass. And while Allen says he doesn't think he's ever crossed the line while coaching, he realizes he still has to be very conscious of his actions. Do you have to think twice about some of the decisions you make now as a coach?
Yeah, but we should be. We should be. I think thinking twice is not a bad thing to do.
Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
If an a-hole is scoring goals for your team, cheers.
Yes.
If he's scoring goals against your team, then he's an a-hole.
After the break, we look into the world of a-holes, from sports to politics, entertainment to everyday life. A new documentary gets to the bottom of a-holes and why many of them are actually successful. That conversation next.
The weather update is brought to you by Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
Here's a question for you. What makes someone act like a jerk? A new documentary screening at Hot Docs this week seeks to find the answer. It's called, pardon my language here, Assholes, a Theory. It's a cheeky but serious look at narcissistic behavior around the world. Here's actor John Cleese's take on whether people in this country fit into that category.
We don't think of Canada as producing assholes, and it's because you're not as insanely, mindlessly competitive as the Americans are. You actually understand how to keep things in balance.
I spoke to filmmaker John Walker about his doc, which was inspired by a book with the same name. I began by asking how he would describe an a-hole.
And this is an individual that is deeply entrenched with a sense of entitlement and feels entitled to have special privileges over his fellow citizens, and an unwillingness to listen to the complaints of others for his special priorities that he's taking for himself. Ironically, we all have an inner a-hole, which is kind of a fun expression, but, if in biblical terms, good and evil, we all have the potential to have this behavior. So I'll just give you a brief. On our birthdays, we have a sense of entitlement. We want to have our cake and eat it too.
Got it.
And our friends and family buy into this because we'll all have our day in the sun. For the a-hole, it's his birthday every day.
You know, we have some things happening in our country right now when it comes to hockey.
Yes.
And we're hearing some of the culture
Yeah.
involved in it. And it sounds like it was a bit of an a-hole culture.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to be an a-hole on the ice. You know, I played hockey. You know, you just a little quick and boom. You know, you've just killed somebody.
Yeah.
So the interesting point we make about that: if an a-hole is scoring goals for your team, cheers.
Yes.
If he's scoring goals against your team, then he's an a-hole. So it's problematic when we have a-holes in charge that are winning for us, making money for us. Then we're less likely to push back on their behavior, and that's an issue. Also, a-holes can be funny; they can attract our attention and so on. As John Cleese says in the film, they can be funny in the movies, but when it's reality, it's a different story.
I think John Cleese says his mom was a bit of an a-hole. You'll have to watch the film to get the rest of that one, because I thought that was pretty funny. You also profile people in the film that stood up to a-holes, right?
Yeah.
Who stood out for you?
Well, Sherry Benson Podolchuk, former RCMP officer. I mean, she is like my hero.
Great story.
An amazing story, because she spent 20 years pushing back small town in the prairies, which is known for its cooperative farming.
And talking about the a-hole culture in policing, and she was a whistleblower on this like 2 decades ago.
Yeah, that's right,
now
yeah.
I'm feeling this lady must feel vindicated, because she was calling out the a-holes for a long time.
Yeah, 20 years. And she went public with a book, Women Not Wanted, with her book, and she was being ignored by the media, by government, and by her colleagues for so many years. And it actually led her to the point of potential suicide. And she mentions in the film that others have gone there because of this bad behavior. So it led to a class action suit against the RCMP, and the federal government appointed the first female head of the RCMP for the force. Sherry is now consulting with them.
Trying to get rid of that a-hole culture.
Yeah, to deal with that culture, yeah. So this is a positive move, but it takes a big effort to push back.
I really feel like the film does contain a warning for us as a society that, especially when it comes to electing a-holes to public office, that there's a warning here that they could be dangerous.
Yes, there is a rising tide, and I think that it is partially social media, that it's empowering people on social media. And it is a warning. Aaron wrote the book as a warning for this behavior. It's about pushing back. It's about having equilibrium. In biblical terms, they're good and evil. We all have the potential for this behavior. The point is to find that equilibrium. We're not going to get rid of all these a-holes in the world, but it's to find that equilibrium, push back so they're not in control, not in charge. The 2008 financial crisis was an example when a-holes were in charge. Total collapse, So that's what it's about. Let's keep pushing for the equilibrium and push back on this so they're not taking over and ruining our lives.
Great film. Enjoyed it tremendously. Especially since it took us on. After the break, in Canada, there's no regulations as to what should be in vaping liquid. So what is in it? We did the test. The results coming up. Human trafficking is the fastest growing crime in Canada. The victims, often underage girls lured into the sex trade. It is a priority for police fighting it, and Joanna Remiliotis joined officers from Durham region as they sprang into action.
It's the middle of the night, and it starts with a briefing.
There's information about firearms at both places.
Durham police officers have arrest warrants and a plan.
So everybody's clear on what we're doing?
Minutes later, the human trafficking unit is on the move.
At what point you decided it's time to move in?
I think when we have enough evidence that we've gathered from the victim's statement and then just the right timing and safety concerns.
This investigation started months ago when a 15-year-old girl came forward to Durham Victim Services. She said she had been lured on social media and forced into the sex trade.
We're going to protect our victim, number one, and then lay charges and hopefully prevent them from trafficking any other females that are out there.
Either way, we still support them.
The focus here is on supporting victims, even if they don't file a formal complaint. The numbers are skyrocketing. Many victims are underaged and terrified.
If somebody says it doesn't bother them, they're lying to you.
Well, a lot of us have daughters in the unit too, right?
Yeah.
So you can imagine that, pitching your daughter and gravitating to, this sickening trade that they're involved in, right? Where they're manipulated and they're forced into sex trafficking, or some of them are assaulted. They're brutalized for 10 to 15 times a day.
Your tactically, you don't need it.
An hour later, they meet with a tactical unit at a Toronto police station. The evidence gathered so far points to 2 females working for a pimp who was in jail. The women may be former trafficking victims who became recruiters.
Our suspect's in the house there.
Hello.
So we're going to go up and take over from the TAC team.
Hey, yeah, the target's there, so can you make your way to the front door?
Turns out only one of the 2 suspects was home. The human trafficking unit spends an hour gathering evidence before leading her out. There are likely more victims. The hope is they will now come forward too.
On nights like this, do you feel like you've made a difference in the bigger fight?
Yes, we have.
What kind of difference do you think you're making?
It's a little, it's like taking a spoonful of water out of Lake Ontario one bit at a time, but we're trying our best, and that's all we can do.
And a tense night quietly ends. Joanna Remiliotis, CBC News, Toronto.
As we told you yesterday, vaping was initially considered an effective way to wean smokers off cigarettes, but it's becoming clear that vaping products are creating significant problems of their own. And unlike for tobacco products, there's no requirement for manufacturers to report all of the chemicals for vapes. So, in our CBC News series, Vape Fail, we went to take a look. Health reporter Christine Bierak has the results.
To find out what's in e-cigarette or vape fluids, we hit shops around Toronto, buying various pods, bottles, and cartridges of vaping liquids. The next step is to get all of these tested. Health Canada doesn't require companies to put ingredient labels on vape products. The agency warns vaping produces an aerosol that may contain dozens of chemicals and lists just 4, the highly addictive drug nicotine, along with propylene glycol, glycerol, and flavors. A lab at the Roswell Park Cancer Institute in New York tested the vape products we purchased. Technicians analyzed 8 different brand name products.
So these are the results of the nicotine concentration.
Some nearly hit the maximum nicotine level allowed, but did match what was advertised. As for the flavors,
we tested some flavors and that show high toxicity.
Results showed numerous chemicals, including benzaldehyde used in cherry flavor. At high doses, it can cause breathing problems. Even more concerning, synthetic polygon, a chemical that simulates mint and menthol.
This is additive that has been banned in food products in U.S. So
it was found to cause cancer in lab animals. Health Canada says it's planning to measure the concentration and potential health effects of polygon in vaping liquids. We asked this lung researcher what he knows about the safety of vape chemicals.
Next to nothing, right? And this is the main problem.
He adds there are thousands of flavoring chemicals. Some are safe to put in your stomach, but most have never been tested in other parts of the human body.
Can it affect the immune system? Can it affect mucus clearance? Can it actually kill cells in the lungs? So for all those flavors, we really don't know.
The Canadian Vaping Association admits their products aren't safe for non-smokers.
It's not benign. No one suggested that it was benign. What it is a lot less harmful than the 7,000 chemicals that you ingest or that you inhale as you smoke.
But for those who never smoked, vaping is a harmful new addiction. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
Just want to check back and make sure we heard you correctly when earlier, Colette, you talked about a warm-up?
I did talk about a warm-up. I mean, it's a little ways out there, but you know these things. We'll hang on anything we can see in that 5-day forecast. So I do have that, and we'll kind of end on that. We'll end on a high note, shall we? Let's talk about what's happening in the interim. So short term, we do have this weak trough that's moving through. So off and on, we're going to see some flurry activity kind of over the next 24 hours. It will be very hard for it to accumulate because it will be wet and mixing at times almost with some showery activity, these flurries so wet. So maybe a couple centimeters, but highly unlikely. And in terms of our temperatures, they're kind of near seasonal. We've been trying to get there. Like today, we went up to about 1 degree. We should have another couple of degrees, but they're close to where they should be. The current temperature, though, we've dipped to -1. We won't see a lot of change in that temperature. It'll fall 1 more degree, but that's about it through the overnight hours. There's that trough moving through. So this is where we get into these wet flurries. What is more significant is that after it moves through and we go into tomorrow, there will be a setup where we'll start to see the wind shifting. And so on the shores of Lake Huron and around Georgian Bay, some squalls will begin to set up. But down into the GTA, it's really going to be that light precipitation, and it's going to be very intermittent. And then Thursday, we get a break into the morning hours. We should start off with some sunshine, kind of like this morning. Wasn't that nice? A way to begin the day. It's just that later in the day, another system's going to work its way in here. This is more so Thursday night into early Friday. With this one, 1 to 2 or 3 centimeters possible. But with the trough that's moving through right now, you see what I mean? Along the lakeshore, very hard to even get a centimeter. But back northwest of the city, that's where it may be 5 to up to 10 centimeters of snow possible because of those squalls. The temperatures overnight tonight, we do still need to consider the winds. So the wind chill factor around -6, -7 for tomorrow morning. And then tomorrow afternoon, a look at those temperatures trying. It's a struggle, but 2, 3 degrees. I said I'd end on that high note, though, where we get into a bit of a warm-up. So we really don't see it. There's that system moving through Friday. For the first half of the weekend, high of 0. It's going to be a cool day with some sunshine. It's the second half. Rain showers to come along with it, Dwight. There's always that kind of trade-off, but a warm-up coming our way.
After last Sunday, we will take that.
Yes.
Thank you, Colette.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This is the result of a president who believes that he is beyond indictment, beyond impeachment, beyond any form of accountability, and indeed above the law. And that is a very dangerous thing for this country.
A sweeping impeachment report was released today. It concludes Donald Trump misused the power of his office and obstructed Congress by stonewalling impeachment proceedings. We'll bring you the very latest after the break. World leaders are in London for a contentious NATO meeting set to begin tomorrow. Today, a series of bilateral meetings dominated the agenda, including the U.S. President's meeting with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Evan Dyer is there.
President Trump came to this summit determined to shake more money out of any NATO allies who don't spend at least 2% of their national income on defense.
If Germany, as an example, is paying 1% and they're supposed to be paying 2%, you're talking about billions of dollars. Well, that means that last year, the year before, all of those years, they would owe us money.
Canada also comes up short on its defense budget. Spending is going up, but won't hit 2% anytime soon. But Trump didn't seem to know that when he met Justin Trudeau this afternoon.
Well, we'll put them on a payment plan, you know? We'll put Canada on a payment plan, right? I'm sure the Prime Minister would love that. What are you at? What is your number?
The number we talk about is 70% increase over these past years, including, and for the coming years, including significant investments in our fighter jets, significant investments in our naval fleets. We are increasing significantly our defense spending from previous governments that cut it.
Okay. Where are you now in terms of your number?
We're at 135?
1.3.
1.4. And continuing to move forward.
They're getting there. They know it's important to do that. And their economy is doing well. They'll get there quickly, I think. Look, it's to their benefit.
And the President knows well as well that Canada has been there for every NATO deployment. We have consistently stepped up, sent our troops into harm's way. We're leading in Iraq. We're leading in NATO, in Latvia. We continue to step up like most of our allies. There are some countries that, even though they might reach the 2%, don't step up nearly as much. And I think it's important to look at what is actually being done.
Trudeau got off a lot more lightly than some of his European allies. Trump called some of them delinquents and threatened to hit them with tariffs if they don't pay more. Trump also appeared to question whether the U.S. would honor its treaty commitment to defend one of those delinquent countries. And so he leaves the alliance a little more frayed and a little less united than before. Evan Dyer, CBC News, London.
While Donald Trump is in London for that NATO meeting, impeachment proceedings are carrying on in Washington. And today, the House Intelligence Committee released its inquiry report.
We should care about this. We must care about this. And if we don't care about this, we can darn well be assured the president will be back at it doing this all over again.
The two main arguments in the report: that Trump abused the power of the presidential office for personal political gain, and that he obstructed the investigation. A vote is taking place on whether to send it onto the Justice Committee. After the break, China's growing power at the box office. Did you know as many as 25 movie screens are being built in China every day? And next year, the Chinese box office will surpass North America's. The effect that's having on what we watch here next. China is becoming the biggest movie market in the world. As many as 25 movie screens are being built in the country each day. That boom is having an effect on what we watch here. Eli Glasner has been looking into this as part of CBC's China Power series. He joins us now. So what is behind this Hollywood-China connection?
So increasingly, it's not enough just to do well here at home, even in Canada, even in North America. A movie needs to be a big hit globally, but something interesting is happening in terms of what is now the most important marketplace. We have a graph here I want to show. If you look at the last 10 years of ticket sales, North America, kind of flat, not exactly great. Some might say a little stagnant, growing, but very slow. Look at China.
Wow.
Look at what's happening. They're saying by 2020, China alone will be the biggest movie marketplace in the world. But here's the thing, getting a foreign film, what they consider foreign films, into China comes with a lot of rules and restrictions and censorship. They only let in about 34 films a year. Now, if you're co-production, you might be able to get around that quota, but again, there is a censorship board that looks very carefully at all sorts of material, what they will let their audience see and what they won't, including, for example, what they say is the 3 Ts, including Taiwan. So I want to show you, this is the trailer to the Top Gun sequel, which is a Chinese co-pro. Look at the jacket on Tom Cruise. The original is on the left, the sequel is on the right. The flag of Taiwan has been removed. And this is something that's been removed already, even before the movie has been released, just so that there aren't any bumps when the movie is released in China, to guarantee that successful release with that now increasingly important audience. I'll show you something else. What's happening now is China's also encouraging to look like a more powerful country on the world stage. This is a co-pro, an animated movie called Abominable. That map there had, you can see these little dotted lines.
Yes.
That's called the 9-dash line. That's a part of the South China Sea. And if you look on a Chinese map, they have these dots in international waters, which they consider their own. Now, a lot of other countries in Asia don't consider that. How did that get into this animated movie? In Vietnam, in Malaysia, and other countries in Asia, they were so upset that that was included just to make the Chinese government happy. They actually banned that film from being seen.
Wow. So you mentioned the censorship, and it's subject to, we think of censorship differently here when it comes to movies,
Sure.
like PG-13 extra. How does that process work then?
Well, it can be laborious, and it's actually getting worse. We talked to a number of Canadian producers who have some big projects on the line, and since there's now kind of a bit of a stalemate between China and Canada, they're seeing their projects go on ice. This is Jordan Patterson. He is working on a $30 million project about Norman Bethune, Canadian doctor, pioneer in blood transfusion, and now he's waiting for script approval in the Department of Historical Importance. Supposed to take 6 months. It's been 1.5 years, and right now, since China and Canada aren't going along so well, that's what's happening to his project. Another producer, this is Raymond Massey. He's made many projects between China and Canada and around the world. He's also based in Vancouver. I chatted with him, and he said what's happening now is that censorship department has actually been brought directly under the control of the Communist Party, the central government. And that's not good if you want a little bit of lax telling your story. Take a look at what he had to say.
Xi Jinping pulling the control of public opinion as close as possible. I mean, it's affecting all areas of media.
They're really concerned for their ability to tell stories and even their colleagues and friends inside China. But you know what's interesting, Dwight? We went to Beijing, well, not myself personally, but CBC News, and we talked to people at a screening of Knives Out, the murder mystery that I reviewed last week.
Yep.
And full audience, but they were talking about that they notice when Hollywood caters to them, when Hollywood tries to include unnecessary Chinese characters or locations, they say it's superficial, and they can see it, and they're not impressed. So already, what Hollywood is doing to try and, cater to those audiences doesn't seem to be working.
I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about this
Oh,
as
yeah.
we move along.
Very
here.
much so.
Thank you, Eli.
You're welcome.
That's climate activist Greta Thunberg stepping off the boat to loud cheers in Lisbon, Portugal. She's making a quick stop there to meet with climate activists before heading to Madrid to take part in the UN Climate Convention. The teen spent 3 weeks at sea making her way to Europe. She was originally headed to Chile, the original venue for the conference, but anti-government protests there forced the switch to Spain. Thunberg had lots to say after arriving in Lisbon. Here's her answer to a reporter who asked what she thought of being called an angry kid.
I think people are underestimating the force of angry kids.
Thunberg also told reporters she'll continue to demand that people in power listen to science, and she will continue to try to improve conditions for future generations. She'll be in Lisbon for a couple of days, then make her way to Madrid, where she is expected to arrive Friday and join thousands of climate activists in a march. Stay with us. We'll be right back. While many people are busy preparing for their holiday feasts, more than 4 million Canadians will struggle to put food on the table. To help those in need, Butterball is donating turkeys to food banks across the country. That includes 8,000 meals of turkey to the Daily Bread Food Bank here in Toronto.
Ready? Yeah. Let's go.
Fresh food donations are so essential to meeting the needs of the clients they serve. Protein is the most needed items at food banks, and so Butterball is being incredibly generous, making sure that they're there at the food bank right in time for the holiday season.
I mean, this is the largest food bank in Canada. 35,000 people a month use this food bank. I think it'd be great if people thought outside of the can, so to speak. Fresh foods, fresh produce, fresh turkey dinners for everyone. These are the kinds of things that the food bank is really trying to do and really trying to grow. Cans are great, and everyone needs canned items, shelf stable, but they also need fresh, healthy foods as well.
1 in 7 Torontonians lives below the poverty line, and this is an outward expression of an inward desire for them to care about their fellow citizens. My hope is that people donate generously, whether it's food or funds at the holidays, but then they start to think about January and February while people are experiencing poverty, that they will continue to donate, that they'll continue to get involved, that they will advocate for systemic change, because nobody in our city should live in substandard housing, nobody should live below the poverty line, and we can make a difference on that front.
And so far, you've helped CBC Toronto raise more than $21,700 for the Daily Bread Food Bank as part of our Sounds of the Season fundraiser. No food donations yet, but that's what we're hoping for. You can help us with that this Friday. In just a few days, CBC Toronto is hosting an open house for our annual Sounds of the Season fundraiser with Daily Bread Food Bank. There will be live performances, musical guests, and events at the Broadcast Centre. You can do your part this holiday season by donating and supporting food banks across the GTA. So come on down and bring a food donation. Now, CBC has this really cool Canadian edition of a famous American game show, Family Feud. And some members of our CBC family took part today, and I heard my friend Colette here was a superstar. Let's take a look.
Name an animal that lives underground. A mole. Name something that gets coated in chocolate.
A peanut.
Name something you see in a hockey match.
Fighting.
Name a way you can cook eggs.
Scramble.
Name an animal that lives underground. You said hedgehog.
Maybe.
I don't know. I don't know. Survey said mole. Mole. Number 1 answer. Name something that gets coated in chocolate. You said strawberries. Survey said
I love how you guys were just like the family on the TV, because that's what they do. Good answers, kid.
Well, they didn't show my first answer.
No,
I was a little bit nervous. It was, what electrical item runs while you sleep?
And I'm guessing alarm clock? That's what everybody would have
That was the number 1 answer. Mike Wise got that. Thankfully, he was my partner, because I said the stereo.
All right, we got 20 seconds to tell them what the weather is going to be. Good job today,
It was bucket list for me.
Excellent.
Been watching since I was a kid. All right, we are looking at some flurries, kind of intermittent, off and on tonight and through the day tomorrow as well. -2, feeling like -6 to -7 tomorrow morning, and then 2 degrees for that high tomorrow afternoon. In terms of accumulation, we may pick up a centimeter or so, but it's going to be wet stuff and kind of a mix, so unlikely.
Cannondale Nutcracker next. She's starring all over the place. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Another one.
That's a good one, too.